Sure. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're doing a recipe that's over on the YouTube channel that came out a couple of days ago. That is loosely inspired, or actually pretty closely, or close enough, inspired by a dish that you can find at PF Chang's called Singaporean black pepper chicken, which we're going to get to in a second. And I have to go get the door. I will be right back. Okay, let's try that again. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Woo. My name is Wesley. This is Woo. Today we're doing a PF Chang's of a dish that you can find at PF Chang's called Singaporean black pepper chicken. That's what I don't know what. Actually, from Singapore. I actually don't understand any of that. But the recipe that we're going to be doing today is loosely inspired by that because we're hacking our way through a bunch of the things on their menu. If you haven't yet, all of those recipes, they live over on the YouTube channel. This one is part of a series that we've been doing where I've been kind of like taking apart a lot of like really classic dishes that you come across in a lot of like really menu from PF Chang's, a bunch of stuff from Panda Express, stuff like that. And kind of like taking a look at what are the American qualities, which is if you reassemble them through the lens of more traditional, at least, Chinese wok cooking. Obviously, a dish like this is really going to traditional wok cooking because we're basically making American food. Because a lot of the time, when you take a look at a dish that comes from a restaurant like PF Chang's, what you're essentially making is American food. So, if you're looking for it, all of those recipes, they always live over on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely head there next because there's lots of fun stuff going on over there. We have new recipes. Those are every last Friday was the recipe for this dish. We were supposed to cook through it yesterday, but Tuesday, but I ended up here we are cooking through it today. So all of that lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you want to help us over there and hit our subscriber goal, we're working on our way up to 5,500 subscribers this month. So hop over and check that out. So today we're going to dive into this dish. There are a couple of things that are really interesting about this dish. Most of it is Americanized. At least most of what I see about the dish, it looks like a pretty Americanized dish. It includes a couple of things. First of all, it includes cilantro, which I don't think I've ever seen in Chinese food. That's not really a thing in cilantro. Cilantro is not really or a big element in food. I'm sure it does come up in Chinese food all the time. I more commonly use cilantro. When I use cilantro, more commonly find myself using that stuff in Thai food, or at least like Southeast Asian cuisine. The one part about the particular dish that I thought was really interesting, and actually reminds me a lot of a more traditional dish is that the way that the chicken is cooked, we're going to be cooking it in a steam bath, which is what's boiling behind me, boiling, which is really interesting to me because that actually reminds me of a really which is essentially like a steamed ginger chicken. You can see it a lot in a lot of like really like Chinese family style dishes. That comes up a lot. We're going to take a look at how that's done and kind of like behind that. So as with pretty much every recipe that we do, or at least every Chinese stir fry that we do, I'm starting off by crushing and mincing. This is 4 cloves of garlic. Crushing, there we go. So the garlic and ginger, very often when we do stir fries like this, you will see me using both in the same context, so both will end up in the wok fry. You see it happen in most of the stir fries that we do. Garlic and ginger generally is the first thing that goes into the wok, and then we bloom those out for their aromatic qualities. Today, however, we're going to treat them a little bit differently. The garlic, we're going to do the same thing. It's going to go straight into the wok fry. But with our ginger, we're going to do the same thing. We're still going to, but going into our steam, because what we're trying to do create what you would in a steamed ginger chicken, which is like a more of a like Chinese, like Cantonese specifically chicken, which was done with a whole bunch of ginger, usually a lot of ginger, and usually sliced in planks. Instead of what we normally would do, which is a mince. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna slice these into planks, and then we're gonna throw it into our marinade, which is a little bit unusual. If you've followed what we've done pretty normally, which is not what we would do. Normally we would fine mince this stuff. So here's our ginger. I'm going for basically planks like so. Then we're going to toss this into our chicken marinade. We're going to set this aside for the time being. This is heading straight into our chicken marinade. We're going to throw it into that steam bath. And the steam bath is going to bring out all of the aromatic qualities to it and sort of infuse the chicken with the ginger in that steam bath, which is really interesting and very lovely. All right, next up, we're going a little bit out of order today. We're going to get to our chicken because we need to time things properly. Otherwise, we're going to be standing around watching chicken steam for a long time. Today, I'm working with some chicken thigh. You could do it with chicken breast too. You could even do it with probably could do it with like a pork chop. I have seen steamed meats done with all. That's a really common one too. You could probably do it with steaks. All of these things will work. Today we're using chicken thigh because it's the thing that happens in PF Chang's recipe book. It's probably the thing that I've seen most commonly done with this particular style of marinade. I love using chicken thigh, by the way, because it has a little bit more fat than what you would see on, say, like a chicken breast. That extra fat, it tends to help keep it a little bit more tender, especially in the wok fry. Because the fat comes out and it renders nicely. But for what it's worth, if you don't have chicken thigh, if all you have is chicken breast, it's going to work just fine too. What I usually recommend is if you're working with chicken breast, use just a little bit more cooking oil and it will work out just fine. So I'm chopping this up into about 1-inch pieces. About 1 inch, like so. This, by the way, is 2 chicken thighs. Usually I would go by, if you want to go by ounces, it should be about 10 to 12 ounces of chicken thigh is what we're looking for, which usually is about closer to 1 and 2.5 pieces of chicken thighs, or 2 very large chicken thighs. So that's our chicken. Then what we're going to do, so normally you would probably see me, if you've watched these streams before, when we marinate chicken, you will probably see me put it into a red bowl, which is the bowl that I generally designate for raw meats. That's why it's red and it looks very different from all of the other meats that I use, or all of the other bowls that I use. Today, very important, we can't do that in a plastic bowl because we're going to be steaming this chicken, and if you put that in a plastic bowl, it's going to melt. Very important. So, most importantly about our chicken today, we're going into a heat-proof bowl, and I have, yes, done this in a not heat-proof bowl and destroyed it. Not fun. Mom's going to get real mad. So, there's our chicken. Let's clean this up. All right, so next up what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick marinade on our chicken. It's not going to be super complicated, but it is going to be where the bulk of our flavor comes from. So our sauce element today, you'll generally notice when we do stir fries, there's two elements. The first is the protein and the marinade that goes with it. Very often that marinade is very, very simple. It'll be something like soy sauce plus white pepper or something. And then usually there's another sauce element, and that sauce element usually has like where most of the things that we're going into the stir fry live. Today, lots and lots of things are going into this marinade, or into this marinade. Not a huge amount, but definitely more than we normally would do because we're trying to bloom it out in the steam bath today. So first and foremost, like we mentioned earlier, there's our ginger going in. Then next up, this is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. Followed by, this is a single tablespoon of sesame oil. Hopefully there's a tablespoon. And then last up, this is going to be a tablespoon of oyster sauce, which is going to give us some nice rich and more like earthy umami. And then last up is our, where's the cornstarch? So last up we're going to do is this is going to be a whole tablespoon of cornstarch, which if you've watched these streams before, you'll know that's a whole crap load of cornstarch. Usually we will use about half a teaspoon or so of cornstarch. The reason that we're using so much today is because it's going to play a part in creating a really, really nice and tender piece of chicken. So really the whole reason why we're steaming our chicken today instead of doing what we normally would do, which is stir frying it, we just go straight into the wok. That would be a lot faster because it's just cooking on really, really high heat. Oops. It's just cooking on really, really high heat. Usually a wok fried chicken, it goes real fast, probably about like maybe a minute or two. Today the steam is going to take a little bit longer. We'll go for about 10 minutes or so in the steam bath. And what's going to happen is, so instead, if we were wok frying this, we would get a nice crispy piece of chicken with nice crisp edges once we wok fry it and sear it. Today, what's going to happen is we're going to get instead essentially the exact opposite. We're going to get a really, really tender and lacy piece of chicken. So somebody on Reddit once mentioned at one point while we were looking at this recipe that it looks a lot like maybe like a less messy version of how you would do velveting, so a velveted chicken, which looks kind of similar. Velveting chicken would be done with baking soda and then boiled and blanched, which is essentially like boiled chicken with baking soda. It results in this very nice and lacy piece of chicken that you then stir fry. Kind of similar to how you would look at like a sous vide, I guess, if you were more familiar with European cooking. Today, what we're going to do is that in a steam bath, which looks rolling over here. That's what happens when we push the wrong button. All right. So over on the stove, I've got this pot of water. We have about like, that's maybe 3 cups of water, not too much water, rolling. And then what I'm using here, this is a steam basket, which is nice because it's basically a bowl with holes in it, so the steam comes through that bowl. It's very useful. If you don't have one of those though, you could just use another bowl. Just turn the bowl upside down and it will achieve the same thing. Either way, what's most important is peppers, whatever that's going into that steam basket, it's got to be heat proof. So everything that we're using, you'll notice in there is all metal, so there's no plastic going on. That's very, very important. It'll definitely melt. A steam bath will get hot enough to melt all your shit. So that's gonna steam. We're gonna let that go for, that will go for about minutes. So 7. Now we're going out of order today. That's a lot longer than you would normally see me doing anything on the stove. Usually when we wok fry, that probably will go much, much quicker. So that's gonna get going. Agent Chin, yeah, subscribe, definitely subscribe, thank you. Thank you forever, also a good username. Thank you. All right. Ooh, these are going. So next up, what I have, these are some Fresno peppers, which are not looking the greatest. We meant to do this stream on Tuesday when these peppers were fresh. Instead, we're cooking them on a Thursday, which is 2 days later than I've been doing it, but should be okay still. It'll be okay. What's tricky with the Fresno pepper, because of the way that we're chopping it right now, you'll notice, so I guess we could take a look at this. Fresno pepper, just like any other pepper, has a waxy surface to it, which means that when you chop it with a knife, it's harder to cut. So you notice when I'm just moving my knife, it's not actually chopping through because the knife has to cut through that waxy layer. So very, very useful. In order to make that happen, the knife needs to be pretty sharp. And then that's a little bit more easy. So very important, before you start chopping through your Fresno peppers, make sure that knife is super sharp. Otherwise, you're going to, your knife will start slipping, and then you're going to cut your finger, which is never good. So if you ever find yourself using a lot of effort to push down on your what you're chopping, that's when you know you're in trouble. That's generally when knives start slipping, and you get yourself in territories of cutting your finger. Not good. All right, so those are our Fresno peppers. By the way, if you can't find a Fresno pepper, so obviously as the name implies, if you're not familiar with a Fresno peppers originate from California, in Fresno, California. We're here in Oakland, which means that we generally find pretty decent Fresno peppers because they're grown here. If you can't find a Fresno pepper, I know other places in the world you might have a lot more trouble finding that Fresno. You can substitute it with really any kind of like mild or medium heat pepper. So jalapeno would be my next best bet. After that, probably like a serrano or maybe even like a bird. It would work well. What's probably more important, since you'll notice that we just started chopping up some green bell peppers, is the reason that it's red. It's because of the way that the color appears in its presentation. So that's real pretty. And I'm pretty sure the reason why PF Chang uses green bell peppers, which if you've ever heard me talk about green bell peppers, you'll know they're gross, but they're really pretty. So I'm pretty convinced that the reason why anytime that you see a green bell pepper come up in a recipe, it's because of presentation. It's because of the way that the color looks and pops against the other things that are in the recipe. So my bet is the way that this recipe was assembled, it usually specifically calls for red Fresno peppers, which means the reason that you don't see red bell peppers in it is because it doesn't want you to be contrasting red bell peppers with red Fresnos. So they call for a green bell pepper. But if you're not familiar with green bell peppers, all colors, you'll notice if you go to the grocery store, all bell peppers, they come in lots of different colors and sizes and stuff. You'll even see some that are like both red and yellow, which are really pretty. But they all come from the same place. They're all the way that they differentiate in color is just because of the point at which that they're picked. So meaning that a red bell pepper, I believe the yellow bell pepper would be the most ripened. To me, at least to my taste, the orange ones are sweetest. The green ones are ones that are picked before they're ripe, or essentially an unripened bell pepper, which means that when you bite into it, it's real bitter and gross. There's the only time that I have ever really enjoyed a green bell pepper is It's deep fried. Those are really tasty. But here we are. We're using it anyway for presentation. I'm chopping these into a large dice, about an inch by an inch. And that ought to do it. So that's our bell pepper. We're going to set those aside. We have a couple of veggies that are happening today. The first is our peppers. Those were our Fresno peppers and our green bell pepper. And then the last of the veggies that we're using today is going to be our onion, which for some reason I could not chop straight. So here's our onion. What I'm doing is I'm removing the tip ends. I'm leaving this root end on. You'll see that I have chopped many onions on the stream before, but we'll reiterate. Anytime that we're dicing an onion, it doesn't matter what size of dice that you're doing. If you're trying to dice an onion, which meaning, in other words, if you're trying to cut an onion in more sections, so if you're not slicing it like so, just going down. If we're going in more than one, we want to make sure that we leave this root end on. So what's happening right now since that root end is still attached, our onion is still holding together, so we can kind of like toss it around. Stuff is still together. Very, very useful. Once you remove that root end, the onion itself starts falling apart, since like Shrek told us, onions are made in layers. Part of my onion is rotten too. Need fresher first. All right. So here's our onion. We're giving it slices down the center, but holding that root end on, and then one down the middle. And then we're going finally down with our dice cut. And now essentially once we get to this bottom portion, I'm basically just chopping around that root like so. And that is, to me at least, is how I've managed to get the best or like most even chop of onion in a dice that I've been able to achieve. So, Alicia, yeah, the broadcast looked like it dropped for a second, but I think it's back up. Hopefully it's back up. That happens with Reddit a lot. Yeah, that happens with Reddit a lot, I've found. I think it's because it happens when the internet is not strong. Which probably means that I should have plugged in the landline, but it should be alright. Sometimes I get lazy, or lots of times I've just been getting lazy and haven't been plugging in the hard lines. So we're on Wi-Fi. Sometimes it gets spotty. So those are our onions. This is some cilantro, which so a couple of people were asking me about this cilantro trick, which I love, and a friend showed me recently. If you ever picked cilantro, you'll know that it takes forever, because when you pick cilantro, you're going through and normally what most people will do when you pick cilantro, you grab a bunch, pull it off the stem, like so. You could save that stem for stalks and stuff. This process takes a super, super long time, because you literally have to go through and pick each stem one by one. So what I love doing, I just learned about this, and it's the most time-saving thing that I have found in recent memory. This is a fork that I'm using right now, and we're basically just running it through the stems. And that's essentially going to pick off the bulk of these stems. It's not perfect. You'll notice that there's still some stems that get through. That's okay, but it's at least better than what we would normally be doing, which is essentially picking these one by one. So you will still eventually have to go through and sort out some of those stems, but it is going to save you quite a bit of time. So it's not perfect. you'll notice that I'm still picking out some stems, which is okay. But normally, if you were watching one of these streams and you were to see me do cilantro, you would probably be watching me pick cilantro for about 5 minutes, which is annoying. And sometimes the reason why I skip cilantro so often. Alright. Last up, what I am going to do is I'm going to do a rough chop on this, which if you've never chopped a cilantro leaf before, very useful. Roll it up into a tight bunch. So if you'll notice, flat leaf cilantro especially, when you chop down, the knife very frequently, it doesn't go all the way through. It's actually, my knife is really sharp, so it is going through. But very often, especially if you have a dull knife or not a perfectly sharp knife, when you chop the cilantro, the knife doesn't go all the way through, so very useful. This is also true for things like basil and like sage, stuff like that, rosemary. What we do is we're gathering it into a bunch, and then I'm bundling it together, and then we're going to chop downward. So, and that's going to give us a little bit of a more even chop for us. Once again, so I'm bunching it up. And then chopping. Alright, so there's cilantro. This, by the way, if you're watching, so in the original PF Chang's recipe, they throw the cilantro right on top, like literally just whole pieces of cilantro just going straight on top, which I think is absurd. And why would you do that? So you're literally going to bite into an entire piece of cilantro, which is disgusting. So if you're following the true to form recipe, there's whole pieces of cilantro that sit on top. If you don't want to bite into a piece of cilantro whole, like a monster, chop that stuff up, because that's gross. All right. All right. All right, last up, we're going to assemble our sauce base today, which in most cases when you watch these stir fries, Coldfield, you're cooking too nice. Yeah, one of the things that I watch most when I'm cooking is other people cooking, which is, I guess, a thing. Last up we're doing is assembling our sauce base. So if you've watched Wu Can Cook recipes before, you'll know that the bulk of our food comes from the sauce. Maybe we see it just go straight into the wok in whole spoonfuls. Today, this is actually going to be more of a supplemental element because the majority of what we're going to get our flavor from is actually going to come from that marinade. It's coming from the aromatics in that steam bath today. So we're going relatively simple here. So that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. This is a single tablespoon of dark soy sauce. 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. Then this is 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. And that ought to do it. You just watch other people cook and Google stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much how I learned how to cook for the most part. Now I run a pop-up, so there. All right, no, that's a totally legitimate way of learning how to cook. I don't see anything wrong with that. So, back over on the stove. I'm not even going to change the camera so we can take a look actually. So there's our chicken. Let's give this a turn. You'll notice that it is fully cooked, and what's happened is that we've cooked this chicken on a really, really gentle cook in that steam bath. And you'll notice that we have all of this lovely marinade coming out here. That's a combination of a couple of things, so that a big part of that is our marinade. But a lot of what's going on down there, you'll notice why it is so thick, even though we actually didn't add, oh, the camera's fogging up. It is extremely thick. And like really, really luxurious. That's coming from the chicken fat itself, and this camera is just gonna keep fogging up. So yeah, all of that coming from the chicken fat, which is real nice. All right. All right, back over on the stove. I've got my wok. We're gonna switch out that pot for our wok today. By the way, the reason that I was using that big old stock pot to steam a giant piece of, giant bowl of, or really, really small bowl of chicken is because the way that, in order for that steam bath to work, the bowl itself has to fit inside of the pot, and then you have to be able to close the pot, which means that you literally have to stack 2 different pots on top of each other, and then also close it. So you have to have a pretty tall pot, or like a pretty tall stock pot or something tall enough in order to get that thing closed. So I actually tried 3 different bowls before I figured out that the only thing that fits is that stock pot. Real quick, the last thing that we're going to add here today to our marinade, I'm going to use black pepper in a couple of different places because it is in the name. But the first place that's going to happen is in our marinade. If you want, you can add this before the steam. I just totally forgot to add it before the steam. And you will probably get some nice aromatic qualities coming out from that steam. We're going to bring that up in a couple of different places because it's such a critical piece, critical element. My delicious nut, great username. Are we using MSG? Today we're not using MSG, so a great question. So very commonly in a lot of Chinese food you will see the use of MSG as an additional element. Kind of looks like salt, and you can buy it in very, very large quantities, similar to the way that you would use salt, and you can use an extra pinch of it, and that would give your dish a little bit more like punch in the pants, you know. Kind of just boosts things up a little bit. Very, very often, I have not used MSG as an additional element in a while. And the reason that I don't use MSG is because a lot of the things that we're using in recipes actually contain quite a bit of MSG already. So today what we use, there's soy sauce, there's dark soy sauce, and I'm pretty sure actually that our Shaoxing wine that we added, all of those things contain MSG already. So very, very often if you're using a wide range, the oyster sauce too includes MSG. All of those things, if you're using a wide range of things in your sauce bases and your marinade bases, they're already giving you quite a bit of MSG. So super often you won't see me adding MSG, not because we're not using MSG, but because it already exists in a whole bunch of different places. So if you find yourself adding it, that's okay. Usually the times when I do a very good job of building up the sauce or building up a marinade base. Or if you just get lazy and you want a shortcut to something very tasty, add a little bit of MSG. But most often when I'm cooking, especially in woks, I probably don't use it because I don't find that I need it. MSG makes you feel, oh yeah, that's not good. My mom says it makes her fingers swell, which is maybe anecdotal. I don't know, but yeah, it does. It is very, very salty. So use that stuff. When you do use it really, really sparingly, and if it does make you feel ill, then definitely don't use it. You can also buy, like almost all of our ingredients that we're using, you can buy that stuff without MSG. So if you're really committed and you don't want to cook with MSG, you can probably source those things without it. Traditionally, MSG comes from like a seafood-based umami. I believe it is originally derived from sea kelp. And that umami comes from that sea kelp. So if you want, you could probably recreate it just using sea kelp. Today, when you buy it in stores from like Ajinomoto and stuff like that, that stuff is chemically produced. So it is produced from some kind of chemical. But the way that it was originally created and what the chemically produced MSG is modeled after, I'm pretty sure is some form of kombu stock that is reduced into MSG. So if it makes you feel bad, use kombu, or don't use it at all. I can never use it, so there you go. All right, so over on the stove, our wok nice and hot. We're gonna add, this is grapeseed oil now that we're using, because I haven't gotten around to buying more peanut oil. All right, in first, here's our aromatics. Just one aromatic today. That's our garlic going in. Followed by, here's our Fresno peppers. Remember, those Fresnos still have seeds in them, which means anytime that you throw a pepper in that still contains seeds, make sure your windows are open because those seeds are going to release a lot of capsaicin into the air. Last up, that was our bell peppers going in. We're going to give those a little bit of a head start. I like to give my bell peppers and peppers a little bit of a head start before the other things that go into the wok fry, because they're a little bit more durable in quality, so they take a little bit longer to cook. So we're not going to like thoroughly cook everything, or really anything that's in our wok fry. Nothing is going to get super cooked all the way through. But what we do like to do is we're going to cook off a little bit of that rawness, which is super important when you're cooking with green bell peppers, because those things are super bitter. The broadcast paused again. Yeah, I saw that. These things have been like, yeah, getting interrupted a lot lately. If you're watching on Reddit, I'm pretty sure that the YouTube broadcast is not going down as often. So I think it's going to work better. That's the broadcast that's behind me. It's also the broadcast. It's up on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WuCanCook. Also, the cameras and microphones are nicer. So I like to give these about a minute or two head start, and that's really just to cook off a lot of the bitterness that comes from a green bell pepper. Yeah, just cooking off a lot of the bitterness that comes from a green bell pepper, especially. And that's also just going to make it a little bit more tender into some. But we're not trying to cook it all the way through, so if you were trying to do like a scrambled egg or something, when you use, or like a egg scramble or something like that, you would probably cook the crap out of a bell pepper, just in order to make sure that it's tender. Today we're not going to do that. It's just going to go for about a minute, and it's going to cook off a little bit of that really bitter quality to it that you get when you bite into a raw piece of bell pepper. And then last up, those are our onions. I'm holding those back a really long time. So the onions are really only going to be in the wok for maybe a minute or so. And that's because onions are super delicate, kind of the exact opposite of bell peppers. We don't want to let those go into the wok for too long, otherwise they overcook pretty quickly. Yeah. You're gonna watch on YouTube because Reddit keeps dropping. Yeah, cool. You're using green bell peppers and meat sauce. That's probably pretty tasty. So I feel like green bell peppers, it would be really tasty and things that are long cooked, because you're cooking all of the bitterness out of the bell pepper. In a stir, know that it's going to be super tasty. I think it's still going to end up being kind of bitter, yeah, not as tasty, or like definitely not as like sweet and fragrant as an orange or a red bell pepper. But I also think that it's going to look really pretty. And notice in our wok, everything is nice and pretty. We have all of these wonderful colors, so there you go. Pretty sure that's why they use green bell peppers. All right, here's our chicken going in. The chicken, by the way, it's already cooked, so we're not doing anything here. At this point, we're really just tossing things to combine. And then last up is our sauce, but I'm not going to add all of it. We want to add this bit very, very sparingly. Anytime that we're using dark soy sauce, we want to go easy on that element because dark soy sauce is super, super concentrated and can for sure get carried away pretty quickly if you're not careful about it. So I'm adding, that's maybe a tablespoon or two at a time, and then really just giving things a toss and adjusting. You mince them and saute with the onions. Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah, kind of like in the sofrito. That would be really nice. All right. Velveteen chicken. Yeah, that's somebody else on Reddit mentioned that too. It's pretty similar to how you would velvet chicken. In a velvet, you would use baking soda, and I'm pretty sure that's like one of the main things involved in velveting is baking soda, because there's a nice chemical reaction that happens. That gives you a very, very similar result, which is essentially a really, really lacy and tender piece of chicken, as opposed to what you will more commonly find in a stir fry, which would be like more of a seared and flash cooked piece of chicken. Last up, anytime that we're cooking in carbon steel, especially in carbon steel woks, what I like to do is give the wok a good rinse right out of the fire. So while it's still hot, we give it a nice rinse, and that's going to get all of this bits and pieces of sugar and sauce and anything that might be left behind off. And then I like to just give it a real quick wipe down, and that's pretty much all you need to do. Use a little bit more of a rinse. That's better. All right. There we go. Sorry, we just lost the YouTube camera for a second. All right, last up, I'm finishing off with our black pepper. We also added that to the marinade itself, and then I also added it to, I believe it was in the sauce too. It's in the name, so we gotta use it. Black pepper, by the way, I don't think I've ever actually seen it come up in like more traditional Chinese cooking. This is the only time that I've ever used black pepper in a wok fry. That's why I only have a tiny little bit of black pepper, because I never use it in Chinese cooking. Usually, more typically, you would see the use of white pepper. That's a little bit more common. Yeah, super westernized. Yeah, that's definitely a very westernized thing. So by the way, if you're looking for what are the American things did, the most Americanized thing that we just used is all of that black pepper. That's definitely a Western thing, probably more of a European thing that comes from. I more often would use, the reason that I have black pepper is whenever I do like Italian cooking, that will probably come up a little bit more often. I don't think I've ever seen black pepper come up in Chinese food. That's probably the most Western thing. The next also most Western thing that you would see, I have never used a Fresno pepper in any kind of Chinese cooking. Those are definitely, that's a very American thing. Generally when you see like peppers, like heat peppers in Chinese cooking, you would see the use of things like Thai chilies. Those are a lot more common. You will also find them in Chinese markets super often. These Fresnos, I had to buy them at an American grocery store because you won't find those in Chinese markets. Chinese markets, you probably won't even find like jalapenos or serranos either. Really, the only kind of heat peppers that you will find in Chinese markets is like Thai chilies. So yeah, those are probably the big two elements that are super westernized. Other than that, though, pretty much everything else that we did, I'm pretty sure. By the way, so this recipe, the original recipe that PF Chang's is actually published, so you can go out and find it. It's on the internet, but it's a really terrible recipe. It's really, really boring. I think the only things that are in it are like, I don't even think it's ginger. I think it's just soy sauce plus oyster sauce and a little bit of rice vinegar. I think that's what's in the marinade, something like that. It kind of just sounds really bland to me. So everything else that we added, that addition of that dark soy sauce, the addition of the oyster sauce and the Shaoxing, all of those things are all things that come from more like traditional cooking. Oh, Szechuan, ooh, 5-slice chicken would be really good. I actually did just do a Szechuan recipe. It's coming up, I think it's coming out at the end of the month. I think it's the Friday after Thanksgiving. I think it's coming out on Black Friday, so Friday the 30th, something like that. We're doing a mapo tofu, which is a really, really interesting mapo tofu because obviously we have cooked mapo tofu on this series all the time. It's also, mapo tofu, by the way, is probably like the most iconic stir fry that you will see come up in Szechuan food. And it's essentially like a tofu and ground minced stir fry that's tossed in doubanjiang, which is like a Chinese fermented bean paste or fermented chili paste for a lot of heat. But the version that we're doing at the end of the month, it's a stinky mapo tofu, which is essentially a mapo tofu that uses a dish in Chinese cuisine that you'll see. It's called chou tofu, which is literally translates to stinky tofu because it is very, very stinky. And I have never seen a mapo tofu that looks like that. It comes from the recipe is inspired by a dish that you find on the menu at a really, really popular Szechuan restaurant here in Oakland called Spices 3. And they have a mapo tofu that uses stinky tofu in place of the plain soft tofu that you will more commonly see in mapo tofu. So that's coming up at the end of the month. I'm super excited for that one. It was really, really interesting and kind of a weird one to take a shot at because I've never eaten. More commonly, when you see chou tofu, it's like deep fried, and you'll see it like eaten as like a small plate because you're basically just eating fried tofu. And it's fermented. It's fermented for like 2 days, I think, almost 2 or 3 days. Definitely a couple of overnights that give it this really, really pungent and like earthy quality to it. Ooh, yeah, honey sesame chicken. The honey sesame one is really good. Yeah, pork chop. If you're diving in, the honey sesame chicken is really good. The most challenging part about it is the deep fry. So it's really a matter of like, do you feel like doing deep frying? Deep frying in itself is it's not, deep frying is not challenging. It's more of a like you have to deal with the oil afterwards. So you're gonna have this whole bottle of like fryer oil that you have to take care of, and like the fryer oil, by the way, it takes a long time to cool down. It usually takes, like, for me, like 12 to 14 hours before it's manageable. You can touch it again, which means that you're gonna have a bowl of fryer oil sitting around, which is super annoying. We haven't actually deep fried in a little while, so if you're okay with deep frying, that's probably the one that I would do. It's super tasty. If you don't feel like deep frying, this is a great one because it's a lot less stuff to clean up. Is mapo tofu on the easier side? Yeah, mapo tofu, by the way, is one. So that was actually the original mapo tofu that we had come out with. It was one of the first. I think it was the first recipe that came out on the YouTube channel, and it is, in my opinion, one of the easiest things that you can cook in Chinese food. It's like the most straightforward type of stir fry that you can do. It's literally like you're stir frying some ground mince, ground pork, and then you're throwing some tofu in and some sauce, and that's literally it. I cooked mapo tofu last night, and it took me like 5 minutes to cook. So on the scale of like easy recipes on the Wu Can Cook series, that might be one of the easiest ones, aside from like the really quick dishes that we've done. You have restaurants, yeah. Cofield, yeah. So we do a pop-up restaurant here in the Bay Area. So if you're in Oakland, we pop up every second and fourth Saturday at the Hayward Farmers Market, and then we're popping up this Sunday and every first Sunday at the Alameda Antiques Fair. And we have some stuff in the progress to get set up at a physical location very soon. So we were just at Degrees Plato last Sunday on Halloween, which is really cool. And hopefully we'll be at a bar soon, very soon. By the way, if you're looking for that stuff, over on the website, wucancook.com/eats. That's where all of the whole schedule of when the pop-up is coming up next it lives. And that's also why anytime that you see me streaming and you don't see this really fancy camera setup, I'm probably streaming at the kitchen while we're prepping. And that's also like, if you see me chopping like an insane amount of things, so like an insane amount of green onions, more green onions than any one human should ever chop, that's probably what I'm doing, is I'm probably prepping for the pop-up. So yeah. Cool, yeah, let me know how that goes though. If you try this one, definitely let me know if you give this one a shot. Also let me know if you try deep frying. The honey sesame chicken is super tasty. It's just that you have to deal with the oil afterwards, which is really annoying. But if you can deal with it, this is a super tasty one. Cool. Yeah, ooh, LA, yeah, that's hopefully coming soon. I used to be in LA quite a bit. 5-spice chicken that's definitely, I'm gonna add that to the list, like a 5-spice fried chicken or like a Vietnamese 5-spice. We'll see. That would be really tasty. I'm gonna have to investigate like different uses of 5-spice because I've seen it used in a number of different places. So cool. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll do my best to circle back and answer everyone. I'll be here doing dishes, so let me know if you have any other stuff. Feel free and repeat. I know that I miss questions all the time, especially when I'm facing that way because I don't see the chats. So feel free and repeat yourself. Also, if you haven't made your way over to the YouTube channel yet, we have new recipes. Those are out every Friday. So this Friday, tomorrow, Friday coming up tomorrow, we're adding to a series that we've been doing where we've been doing a lot of Chinese American fusion dishes, or like Asian fusion dishes, I guess, and kind of like mashing things together. We did a really fun and interesting lapchung carbonara, which the internet actually didn't get as mad as I was thinking it would about that one. What else did we do? Forget what else we did. I think the kimchi fried rice was in that series. And then this coming Friday, tomorrow, we're going to be adding a miso glazed salmon taco, which is going to be really interesting. We're going to take a look at the uses of miso outside of Japanese food, which is really fun and tasty. So all that stuff popping up over on the YouTube channel. We're also live streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 PST. Usually on the Tuesday following a release, that's generally when we're going to cook through the recipe that came out. So this was supposed to come. We were supposed to be live streaming this on Tuesday, but I forgot, or I didn't forget. I was just really tired and I didn't feel like cooking. So that's usually on Tuesdays, so that's when we cook through those recipes. So next Tuesday, Tuesday as in Tuesday next week, we'll be cooking through that miso glazed salmon. So, yeah. Ooh, Asian American barbecue fusion. Yeah. Ooh. We did an Asian American fried chicken fusion, which was really fun and interesting. Barbecue, I'll have to think about that. Because I really only know of one way of barbecuing the Chinese food, which is basically a tasi bao, which, by the way, is really hard. Tasi is really hard. There are varying degrees of how to cheat on making tasi, but for the most part, it's really hard. It's a very, very challenging thing to make. And generally, what I would recommend is if you're going to make tasi, tashi, by the way, is like an aged, like a dry aged and then glazed Chinese pork, like a pork rack, and it's super hard. So, by the way, if you're gonna make tashi, or if you want tashi, or at the very least if you want to make tashi bao, I've read that the best shortcut is just go to a Chinese butcher shop and buy some tashi and put it in a bao. And that's what I've read is that's the best way to do it. The next best way is that tashi, you have to buy that stuff jarred. If you don't do those two things, the next thing that you would have to do is source some very, very obscure Chinese spices that I actually don't even know what all of them are. But when I started looking into it, I got really intimidated and have not circled back to making tashi bao in a while because there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into tashi that's super hard. So yeah, maybe soon, but it's gonna be like, that's gonna be a couple days worth of work, so we'll see. Yeah, like Korean barbecue. Oh yeah, we could do like a Korean barbecue fusion. Korean barbecue, Asian American fusion. That would be really fun. Like a bulgogi, like a Texas style bulgogi or something like that. Like super thin stuff. Ooh, that would be really good. Like a Texas style bulgogi. I'll think about it. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. We'll be back Tuesday, and check out the YouTube channel. By the way, we're working our way up to 5,500 subscribers by the end of the month. I think we're like 50 subscribers short. I think we're less than that. It's like 30 subscribers short. This number at the bottom of the screen is wrong. So I think we're getting really close. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. Only if you're interested. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. I don't know why people do that. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
If you think that you don't know, never mind that you still don't love yourself. No, you can find it from somebody else. No, everybody's got to grow up. Sometimes funny how we shoot the move. Still, will we fight it, baby? Never mind. Everybody wants to be nothing. I still got streets, but they don't love me like they used to love it. And I'm reminded of how bad I used to want it. And yes, I still got streets, but more like a toolkit of my 20s, and it's breaking me down. Want to be, baby, yes, sir. Reaching for the bottom, brought me back from being too far gone. Oh, it's Tennessee whiskey. You're real sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your lip all the time. I live for love on the same old places. Found the bottom of the bottle was always down. But you poured out your heart, and I didn't want to waste it. There's nothing like love to give me yours is Tennessee whiskey. You're real sweet as strawberry wine. Ooh, yeah. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time. You're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
Give into that easy living, goodbye to my hope.